Do you remember the first scene of The Mandalorian? Whether you have seen the show or not, I believe that the first few minutes of the Star Wars spin-off show about a Mandalorian bounty hunter can make us learn very important things about the ethical and political stakes of the renewed interest in Western worlds. In particular, The Mandalorian offers a very unique texture to the traditional Western figure of the bounty hunter. Let's watch and comment the exposition scene of the show so we can convince ourselves that it is the case. A man in armor is oriented with a beeper. The viewer understands that he is tracking something or someone and that he is using some sort of GPS tracker. Or more familiarly in our filmic imagination, some analogon of a metal detector. In a bar, which is very typical of the Star Wars universe, another individual from an unknown fish-like species is getting assaulted by other men who want to sell body parts of his on the black market. Right when the latter were about to mug or hurt the seemingly innocent individual, known as the Mithril according to the name of his species, the man in armor arrives, putting a stop to the altercation, but immediately starting a new one. Since a Mandalorian in armor never goes unnoticed, and the outlaws in a typical Western fashion are eager to show him that they are running the place. But as a true gunslinger, the Mandalorian succeeds in beating all of his opponents by himself, aided by Mandalorian gadgets and weapons and his old rusty Beskar armor. Thanks to the man in armor, the Mithril is safe, calm and order are restored in the bar. But still as silently as the man with no name in Sergio Leone's The Lost Trilogy, the Mandalorian shows the Mithril an hologram of him, showing him that he is wanted and that he has a bounty pack on his head. The first words that come out of the Mandalorian's mouth, even though we never see it under his helmet, are also a self-explaining nod to traditional Western posters saying dead or alive. He says, "I can bring you in warm or I can bring you in cold." That exposition scene alone allows us to understand very important stakes of the show that we are about to watch as a whole. What I am particularly interested in is the very intentional reusing and transforming of codes of traditional American Western, and especially ones in which there is a bounty hunter character at the core of the movie. Of course, a bounty hunter has to be at the same time a gunslinger, that is to say someone who excels in the use of firearms, given that he is chasing experienced criminals that have succeeded in escaping the justice system for now. But the question that for the viewers always follow a bounty hunter character is the one regarding the precise motivations of his actions. It always starts with a simple ethical dichotomy. Does the bounty hunter do this job in order to bring justice?
I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire.
Or does he do it only because he sees it as an opportunity to make a lot of money, as an extension of the traditional figure of the lawman in Western fictions, which is generally embodied by a sheriff of any 19th century Western town? On the contrary, if he only does this for the bounties and the gold, then the bounty hunter can be seen as a selfish and interested individual whose propensity to serve the interests of justice and cloaking himself in the figure of the law is only contingent, a non-necessary subproduct of his actions. But the sole fact that an interested man can pretend to be a respectable lawman shows us that the dichotomy we thought existed between the two options regarding the morality of the bounty hunter is only apparent. As a matter of fact, as we will see in depth in the upcoming videos, the American ideology, as it has always been consolidated and fantasized in Western fictions, inheriting a certain understanding of classical liberalism, consists in considering that it is precisely because each and every one of us is pursuing their own self-interest or personal interest that we can hope to achieve social and moral progress at the broader level of society as a whole. Hence why the bounty hunter can generally be perceived by Americans as a moral figure, because he exemplifies the idea that one can at the same time and with no contradiction pursue the interests of law and justice, and pursue at the same time their own selfish interests too. The bounty hunter, since its origins, represents an ambiguous moral figure who is supposed to exemplify the ideal of the American dream, or at least allowing this ideal not to be dismantled. By the way, it succeeds in miraculously gluing back together the two seemingly contradictory promises that the United States of America have made to its inhabitants, at least since the American Revolution, which are against the British aristocracy, building a democracy of free men who are allowed at the same time to seek private property and the pursuit of the accumulation of wealth that is correlated to it. B. The society should at the same time be fairer and more moral than other non-democratic societies. But the ambiguity of the correlation between these two promises would end up becoming obvious for Americans themselves. Rationally, is there a guarantee that social and moral progress are to be caused by each and everyone's search for the accumulation of wealth? In other terms, is the person who seeks to get rich by his actions necessarily also working towards a greater amount of justice in the society as a whole? Or is it not necessarily the case? Subsequently, how can we trust the bounty hunter or the Mandalorian to be a positive moral figure, since as the insensibility or indifference shown by the Mandalorian to the fate of his targets, as he says, he doesn't care whether it brings them warm or cold. It shows us that the only thing that he is seemingly interested in is the bounty attached to the success of his hunt. So can we trust him to be a positive moral figure then? All of these moral tensions and ambiguities are in a way typically American, profoundly connected to the history of American cinema, as the history of the evolution of the Western genre is itself connected to the feeling of growing incredulity towards the so-called American dream. And as we have seen, and this is not a coincidence, these moral ambiguities are also at the core of the opening sequence of The Mandalorian, which willingly plays with our knowledge of the codes of the Western genre in cinema, and especially of the codes of the bounty hunter westerns. Even though one can figure out quickly that the Mandalorian is in search of a wanted criminal with a bounty on his head, the scene is made in a way that we are led to believe that the Mandalorian is hunting for one of the outlaws in the bar that are attacking the mithril to sell his musk on the black market. If it were the case, then it would mean that the success of his plan of actions would reaffirm the apparent duality of the American promises as we have described it, at least potentially, as it would restore peace and justice, and at the same time, with no apparent contradiction and in the same gesture, it would be a self-interested action from the Mandalorian. But this situation is complexified when we finally understand that the mithril we thought was harmless and innocent is actually the target the Mandalorian is searching for. It means that the fact that the Mandalorian restores peace in a village
I have brought peace!
by eliminating local outlaws, which, as we will see, is a cliché of Western movies, was just a collateral damage, an externality of his action and not his original intention. Nevertheless, the correlation between the two results, that is to say, bringing back peace and justice on the one hand, and Mendo's pursuing of his own self-interest on the other hand, is enough to plant seeds of doubt on the moral nature of the bounty hunter's way. That is to say, what if, as liberals tend to think, it's precisely through one's pursuit of self-interest that we can hope to make our way towards peace and justice? The doubt is slowly settling in, and it comes with the moral ambiguity of the main character of the show, which is accentuated by the way we cannot see his face in the helmet, in which we are used to think that we can decipher one's moral character or at least one's moral intentions. But one thing is certain at this point: The Mandalorian is an intentional and thought out play with the codes of Western fiction. and, as we will see, a play with the codes of Western spaghetti movies, which as a genre was already itself a reflection on the ideological thoughts of traditional American Westerns. But can The Mandalorian be understood and received emphatically if we don't know about the context of the Star Wars universe? Of course not. But it does not mean, at the other end of the spectrum, that every Star Wars expanded universe fiction can only be interpreted and analyzed through the unique glasses of its meaning inside Star Wars. With the contemporary shift in the film industry towards the development of mostly franchise movies solely because they make a lot of money, we have been conditioned to think, for example, that the only legitimate way to talk about The Mandalorian, for example, has to be in the perspective of the bubble glass autonomous world of Star Wars. I think this is a mistake, and that one cannot appreciate the novelty of The Mandalorian without knowing why it brings a very unique perspective on the figure of the traditional bounty hunter in Western movies and fictions. Furthermore, broadening our lens will allow us, I'm sure of it, to better appreciate and understand the best new fictions in the Star Wars universe, such as The Mandalorian and Andor, in opposition to the artistic, emotional and political failure of the third trilogy, movies 7 to 9, in which political implications of the Star Wars universe to understand our contemporary world better are some sort of a caricature or a parody of what they could be. On the contrary, I will try to show why The Mandalorian and then Andor are ethically and politically relevant while still being great entertainments for the viewers, creating and showing us life forms that are just at the right distance from us so that we can appreciate at the same time their exceptionality and their ordinarity. That's, in a few words, the whole point of this YouTube channel, Ordinary Aesthetics. And if you want to learn more and see more videos about The Mandalorian and/or other movies and TV shows that are to come, then please subscribe to the channel and, of course, leave your comments down below.